One plant produces 4 times more paper per acre than trees. It matures in 120 days, not 20 years. The same plant yields 3 times more fiber per hectare than cotton, using a quarter of the water and 0 pesticides. Its seeds produce biofuel. Its stalks produce bioplastic. Its core builds houses that absorb carbon from the air. In 1938, Popular Mechanics magazine called it the new billion-dollar crop. Within months, one of the most powerful men in America made sure you would never hear its name again. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what this plant is, who buried it, and how to grow it in your own backyard. Welcome back to Garden Explained with Harry. Hit that subscribe button. Now let us begin. Long before the invention of synthetic fibers, before petroleum became king, before anyone ever heard the word plastic, there was a crop that held civilization together. George Washington grew it at Mount Vernon as one of his 3 primary crops. The British Navy built its empire on ropes and sails woven from its fibers. The word canvas comes from its Latin name. For thousands of years, every major naval power on Earth depended on this single plant. Before the 1930s, it grew on every inhabited continent. American farmers cultivated it from the colonial era straight through to the 20th century without interruption. It was as common as wheat. It was as essential as timber. This plant is hemp, Cannabis sativa, and what it can do reads like science fiction. Start with paper. 1 acre of hemp produces as much paper pulp as 2 to 4 acres of forest over a 20-year cycle, but hemp does not need 20 years. It reaches full maturity in 120 days. A farmer plants it in spring and harvests it before autumn. The paper it produces can be recycled 7 to 8 times. Paper made from wood pulp can only be recycled 3 times before the fibers break down. The manufacturing process for hemp paper requires 75 to 85% less sulfur-based acid than conventional wood pulp processing. In a world that loses roughly 10 million hectares of forest every single year, those numbers matter. Now consider textiles. Cotton is the most widely used natural fiber on the planet. It is also one of the most destructive. Producing 1 kilogram of cotton fabric requires approximately 10,000 liters of water. Half of all agricultural pesticides used on Earth are sprayed on cotton fields. Hemp needs none. It requires no pesticides, no herbicides, and only moderate amounts of fertilizer. A peer-reviewed study published in the Journal of Cleaner Production in 2020 found that hemp fiber agricultural costs are 77.63% lower than cotton. Hemp produces 3 times more usable fiber per hectare. The fiber itself is stronger, more durable, and naturally resistant to mold and ultraviolet radiation. Then there is energy. Hemp seeds contain 34% oil by weight. That oil can be cold-pressed and converted into biodiesel. The stalks and herds, the woody inner core of the stem, can be processed through pyrolysis into biomass fuel with a 95.5% fuel-to-feed ratio. That means almost all of the plant material converts into usable energy with virtually no waste. And when hemp grows, it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at a rate that makes forests look slow. According to researchers at Cambridge University, industrial hemp absorbs between 8 and 15 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare during a single growing season of 3 to 4 months. Forests capture only 2 to 6 tons per hectare per year. Hemp sequesters carbon 2 to 3 times faster than trees every single year. But the single most extraordinary application is hempcrete. Hempcrete is a building material made from the woody core of the hemp stalk mixed with a lime-based binder and water. It is the only widely available construction material on Earth that is classified as carbon negative. That means it absorbs more carbon dioxide than it produces across its entire life cycle. Research by the Belgian company ISO Hemp found that 1 cubic meter of hempcrete removes 75 kilograms of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere over its lifetime. Meanwhile, Manufacturing 1 ton of Portland cement releases approximately 0.9 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Hempcrete weighs 1/8 as much as concrete. It requires 3 times less heat energy to produce, and it grows 50 times faster than the wood it replaces. In 1938, Popular Mechanics published a landmark article titled "New Billion-Dollar Crop." It was the first time in American history that the word billion was applied to any agricultural product. The article described a new machine called a decorticator that could strip hemp fiber from the stalk at industrial scale for the first time. The United States Department of Agriculture had been predicting since 1901 that once such a machine was invented, hemp would become the #1 farm crop in the country. Hemp acreage had been doubling every year since 1930. By 1937, 14,000 acres were under cultivation with plans to keep expanding. Then everything stopped. What happened next is one of the most effective corporate erasures in American history. And it started with a man who owned more trees than anyone alive. William Randolph Hearst was not just a newspaper publisher, he was the largest private timber owner in America. His company, Hearst Paper Manufacturing Division, operated vast timberlands and produced cheap tree pulp paper. His newspapers were printed on that paper. His fortune depended on trees remaining the dominant source of paper pulp in the United States. The new hemp decorticator threatened to make tree-based paper obsolete. Hemp pulp was higher quality, cheaper to produce, and the crop renewed itself in 4 months instead of decades. There was something else. During the Mexican Revolution, Pancho Villa's army had seized 800,000 acres of Hearst's prime Mexican timberland. Villa's soldiers were known for smoking cannabis. Hearst despised the plant on financial grounds, personal grounds, and racial grounds simultaneously. His weapon was his newspaper empire, the largest in the world at that time. Beginning in the 1920s, Hearst's papers launched a relentless campaign of stories about a terrifying new drug called marijuana. In 1923, a Hearst newspaper reported that marijuana was a shortcut to the insane asylum. In 1928, another Hearst paper called it the murder drug. These were fabricated stories, invented crimes, racist caricatures of Mexican and Black Americans designed to terrify a white readership. But there was a critical trick buried in the language. The word marijuana was an obscure Mexican slang term. Almost nobody in America connected it to cannabis or hemp, the crop that had built the nation's ropes and sails and paper for 200 years. Hearst used an unfamiliar word to make a familiar plant unrecognizable. Meanwhile, the DuPont Corporation had its own reasons to want hemp gone. In 1937, the same year everything changed, DuPont patented processes for making plastics from oil and coal. They also patented a new sulfate and sulfite process for making paper from wood pulp. According to DuPont's own corporate historians, these patents accounted for over 80% of all the company's railroad car loadings for the next 60 years. That same year, DuPont filed its patent on nylon, a synthetic fiber engineered to dominate the textile and cordage markets that hemp would have owned. The connection between these men was Andrew Mellon. Mellon was the Secretary of the United States Treasury and the wealthiest man in America. He was also a major investor in DuPont. Mellon appointed his own nephew by marriage, a man named Harry Anslinger, to lead the newly created Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Mellon had the money, Hearst had the newspapers, but they needed someone with a badge and a mandate. Anslinger compiled what he called Gore Files. These were horror stories about marijuana pulled directly from Hearst's newspapers. Crimes that never happened attributed to a drug that most legislators had never encountered. He brought these files to a poorly attended congressional committee and testified under oath that marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. The American Medical Association opposed the legislation. Their legislative counsel, Dr. William Woodward, told Congress that the claims were unsupported by evidence. He was ignored. The Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 passed without a roll call vote. President Roosevelt signed it on August 2, 1937. It did not technically ban hemp. It imposed a tax of $100 per ounce that made legal cultivation economically impossible. The word marijuana ensured that most members of Congress did not even understand they were legislating against the same plant their own government had promoted for centuries. The most damning proof that this was never about public safety came 5 years later. In 1942, after Japan seized the Philippines and cut off America's supply of imported fiber, the United States Department of Agriculture produced a film called Hemp for Victory. The government reversed its own ban and urged patriotic farmers to plant hemp for the war effort. Ropes, parachute webbing, shoelaces, uniforms, 400,000 acres of hemp were planted between 1942 and 1945. The very same agency that supported its prohibition now cheerfully promoted the very same plant. After the war, hemp was once again prohibited. The film was buried. For decades, the USDA Library and the Library of Congress both denied that Hemp for Victory ever existed. They told anyone who asked that no such film was ever made by any branch of the United States government. In 1989, 2 VHS copies were finally tracked down and donated to the Library of Congress by cannabis activists Jack Herer, Mia Farrow, and Carl Packard, who had spent years searching through forgotten film archives. The ban lasted 81 years, but science did not stop. In 1941, Henry Ford built a prototype automobile in Dearborn, Michigan, with body panels made from a composite of plant fibers including hemp, soy, wheat, and flax. The car was 300 pounds lighter than steel equivalents. Popular Science reported it had 10 times the impact resistance of steel. Ford designed it to run on plant-derived biofuel. He called it the car that grows in the field. The New York Times covered it. Then Pearl Harbor happened. Wartime steel priorities took over. The prototype disappeared. Ford's vision of agriculture-based manufacturing died in a warehouse, but the evidence survived. Today, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Porsche, Volkswagen, Honda, and General Motors all use hemp fiber composites in their vehicles. A single Mercedes C-Class contains up to 20 kilograms of hemp material. Ford was 80 years early. The car industry eventually proved him right. In 2018, the United States Farm Bill relegalized industrial hemp cultivation after 81 years of prohibition. Canada had relegalized it in 1998. France and China never fully banned it, and they remained major producers throughout the era. Since 2018, hemp processing infrastructure has been slowly rebuilding in the United States. Panda Biotech opened the hemp gin in Wichita Falls, Texas, processing 10 metric tons of raw hemp per hour. South Dakota's first decortication plant began operating in 2023 in the small town of Winfred. The infrastructure is coming back 81 years late, but the pattern Hearst established has not fully disappeared. Hemp still represents less than 1% of agricultural land in North America. The petrochemical industry does not fund research into it. The timber industry does not mention it. The cotton lobby does not acknowledge it. You can grow it yourself. Where it is legal, hemp thrives in USDA hardiness zones 3 to 10. That covers most of the continental United States and equivalent climates across Europe and Asia. Check your local regulations first, because laws vary by state and country. If cultivation is permitted in your area, sow seeds directly into the ground after the last frost date, or start them indoors 6 weeks earlier in small pots near a window. Space plants 10 to 12 inches apart. Hemp tolerates poor soil but performs best in well-drained ground with decent sun exposure. Water regularly during the first few weeks of establishment. After that, natural rainfall is usually enough. The plant grows fast. Within 60 days, the stalks will be taller than you are. By 120 days, the crop is ready for harvest. Cut the stalks for fiber. Collect the seeds for pressing into oil. A small hand press costs less than $100. One harvest from a modest backyard plot can produce enough seed oil to last a household an entire year. Let a few plants go to seed at the end of the season, and they will scatter thousands of seeds into the soil. The following spring, new plants emerge without any effort from you. One planting becomes a permanent cycle. The crop comes back year after year. This is not conspiracy. This is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. A plant that grows in 120 days cannot generate timber futures. A fiber that requires 0 pesticides cannot generate pesticide sales. A building material that absorbs carbon dioxide cannot sustain the cement industry. A biofuel pressed from seeds in a backyard shed cannot justify petroleum refinery expansion. What cannot be patented cannot be controlled. What cannot be controlled cannot generate quarterly earnings. What does not generate quarterly earnings does not receive a marketing budget, and the plant does not care about any of it. It does not care about stock prices or patent portfolios or congressional committees. It cares about photosynthesis. It cares about cellulose. It cares about pulling 15 tons of carbon dioxide out of the sky while timber executives sit in boardrooms arguing about next quarter. Subscribe and watch the next video. Discover more secrets hidden beneath nature.